To read Back to Reality, the best-selling novel of the bestseller experiment by the two Marks, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/back to reality.
And subscribe to this podcast to get loads of extra bonuses. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/subscribe. Let's run the show.
Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a best-selling novel and inspire you to finish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe. We want to welcome you very much to our live episode this April. This is the Bestseller Experiment live, going out to the world on video. If you're a subscriber of Patreon, you will be able to see this. You will have been able to see this, or the pre-recorded version of it, live. And we do this about a week before it actually goes out. So our sponsors today is actually us, isn't it, Mr. Stay? We've decided to sponsor ourselves, because why not? Because we can do that. We make the rules up here. So we would like to...
I want to make a habit of this.
No, absolutely not. But we would like to tell everyone about our amazing Patreon subscriptions. This is a special subscription for everyone who would like to support this show, to keep it going, to cover our costs, our incredible editor and websites and all the other things that we have to do. And we would like to offer you some incredible benefits. So if you pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, you'll find out everything that we offer. But just as a few things that people get for subscribing for a measly Starbucks a month to this podcast, Mark, let's give them a quick rundown.
Well, if you're going to be a chart topper supporter, you get everything, basically. So you get access to this live show. You get to join us in the green room before the show and chat informally, and people make terrible comments that we'll delete from the show.
I know, you missed out today, guys. Oh, good one.
And so you get access that way. You get all our deep dives. Now, the deep dive episodes, we've got over 40 of them now. We had one go live this week featuring Wynne Kelly-Charles and Richard Brewster talking about audio dictation. It sparked this great debate because all sorts of people, audio is really coming of age. That software is really good now, and Wynne has written entire novels on it. Richard was telling us all about how he works with, dispels a lot of the myths around it. But we've got stuff coming up on Facebook ads, on Bookswarm. Simon Appleby from Bookswarm's coming on. We've got David Bishop talking about comic book writing. We got a fantastic one I recorded the other day with Rhoda Baxter and Jane Lovering talking about comedy writing. I managed to get about 2 words in edgewise. That's a very entertaining episode.
That's amazing.
We've got stuff on the editorial process, digital first, metadata. We've had Dave Chesson, the Kindlepreneur, on here. It's just tons of extra material. Also, very soon, I'm going to be launching the next round of one-page punch-ups. This is where we get an editor you send in 1 page from your work in progress, and we get an editor to read it and critique it. We've done a couple of these so far. They are incredible. We all learn something from them. We all take something away, and you get featured on the show. So if you want to be one of those authors who says, when you're doing your letter to your publisher or your agent, it says, as featured on the Bestseller Experiment, which, has a little cachet these days. So, get involved. Get
Fantastic.
involved.
And not just that, you get to join our BXP team, which is on Facebook. It's a private group. Amazing people, like-minded people. If you love this podcast, you want to be a part of that group, because you will find such incredible people on that. A lot of them are with us today on this live recording in the studio audience. You get to ask questions in advance to some of the amazing best-selling authors that we interview, as well as special guests that we have on the live broadcast, which we have today. So you get a chance, even if you can't make the live broadcast, to get your questions answered, as well as shout outs and the rest. So that's only about a tenth of what you get as a Bestseller Experiment patron. So please do pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and pledge your $10 a month to us, and you'll gain access to all that and more. So today, Mr. Stay, we have a jam-packed episode. We have a special guest in the audience who we're going to actually announce very soon. But somebody's just asked us, in fact, we should say hello to everyone who's joined us in the studio. We're going to do a few shout outs. Craig wants to know, how's the paperback sales going, Mark? I know.
Well, we're in double figures.
We're in double figures.
Yeah. Well, we've had the most incredible week. Now, if you listened to last week's episode, we were pretty down in the doldrums. Things were not going well. We're selling single figures every day of the Kindle. Then, friend of the podcast and friend of our guest, in fact, Queve McDonnell, who is a comedian and best-selling author. He, because we've interviewed him, he's coming up on an episode really soon, and that's a fantastic episode. We've got lots to look forward to there. He put us in his newsletter, and overnight we sold 100 copies.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's like
because I check the sales each morning. I run the report up, and I was like, oh, we've sold Oh, I've never seen it go up that high before.
Yeah.
Not since launch day, So
Exactly.
So we've sold in total 341. We sold a copy on Nook. Remember them?
No.
Nook, yeah, Barnes and Noble.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So that's great. We're still sorting. We finally sorted out Apple, and it's currently in review on Apple, so it should be available in the Apple bookstore soon. So 341 in total, 16 paperbacks. Yeah.
And for anyone else who's interested in getting on Google Books, we actually, when we went to apply for Google Books to get our book on there, we couldn't. It said, sorry, we're currently closed. It's one of these Google things. They did it with Gmail. They do it with everything. They basically kind of have to invite you. And we did that probably a month ago, I think a month and a half ago. And then randomly out of the blue, I got an email from them saying, hey, welcome. You can now kind of register your book. So here's a tip for everyone listening today. If you even don't have a book ready to publish, go along to Google Books and just stick your name on the list, because I think there is just a general waiting time regardless of, so go do that now. And then when you're ready to publish, you'll have the invite and you can sign up straight away. So it's exciting. I'm very excited. But today we're going to be learning even more about how we can sell more books. So Mark, why don't you introduce our incredible guest that we've got this morning in the studio?
Yes, I will. We have the amazing Dave Guaghran. Now, Queeve pointed me in David's direction, because David has written all sorts of books. Let's Get Digital, Let's Get Visible, Amazon Decoded, and Strangers to Superfans. These are the most amazing, accessible, readable books on how to sell more copies of your books. And what he doesn't know about Amazon. I mean, I looked after Amazon from a publisher point of view for 10 years for Orion, but David is coming in it from the indie author point of view, and it's a big shift. It is a big shift. So I'm learning a lot. We put this out for listener questions, so we've got some listener questions to go through. But David is a best-selling author in his own right, but also does these amazing books. He's such a positive force in the world of indie publishing. And David, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great to have you, Dave.
Pleasure.
Absolutely brilliant, and welcome. This is the first time we've done a three-way live broadcast, and with the powers of technology, we're still actually live and running right now, which I'm personally completely chuffed about. So thank you for being the guinea pig, David, and we're going to enjoy having a great chat with you. And we've got people in the studio today as well, so we're going to say to everyone out there listening to the show live, please put your questions in the chat window for David, because I'm sure, David, you'll be welcoming any random things that fly your way.
Sure. And just in case anyone's curious, I'm not actually broadcasting from the inside of a snow globe. It kind of does have that kind of hazy.
It does. I know. You look like...
I don't know. I got this very fancy laptop, which is a delight generally. But for some reason, they skimped on the camera. But there you go.
You look great. For anyone looking at this live, I think we're all looking quite smart today. I've even had a shave today myself, actually.
It looks like I'm surrounded by candles or something. I like this. Right?
It's dove from above. You know that? You remember that show?
Yeah, I do.
Brilliant stuff. So, David, where are you based right now? Where are we talking to you from?
I'm based in Dublin, right in the city. I moved back to Ireland. I was abroad for quite a few years. I moved back to Ireland a couple of years ago. Although I've learned actually since, when I'm talking to people over here, like I was always kind of strangely mysterious about it. I always tell people I was away for a few years, and then I realized people thought I'd been in prison or something. So I should probably be a bit more specific.
You're working on an oil rig.
Yeah. I was living in Prague for a few years and London for a few years before that, actually. But I moved back home a couple of years ago.
Excellent stuff. Fantastic. So take us back. The thing that jumped out for me, the opening line that Mark said, from strangers to super fans. That's a cracking line. Did you come up with that?
I did, yeah. But the thing was, I actually wasn't going to call it that. I was going to call it the reader's journey, which is kind of the paradigm that I have in the book. And I think the subtitle was, for ages, until just before I published it, or just before I got the cover, I think was From Strangers to Superfans. And like anytime I was talking to anyone about it, like I could see strangers to superfans is where their eyes kind of like bugged out a bit. And that obviously seemed a lot snappier. But yeah, I originally wasn't going to call it that. I kind of stumbled across it. But yeah, as soon as I actually saw it on the cover, I was like, yeah, that should have been the title all along. I don't know what I was thinking.
Excellent stuff. We've heard so much about your books, David. Everyone's the thing that I keep seeing is everyone says this is the go-to. This is the first place you need to go. What was the first thing that got you into actually wanting to help other writers?
I was trying to prove someone wrong, actually. Like most Irish people, all my milestones in life are based on grudges and arguments. I think I was hanging out on a forum for writers that was more geared towards people who were looking for an agent and that kind of thing. And I was myself at the time. But after 18 months of that, I was ready to try something else. And I was hearing a lot about self-publishing. This is quite a few years ago. This is back in 2010, 2011. And I was initially skeptical, like a lot of people were at the time, about self-publishing. But as I started lurking in a few self-publisher forums and listening to stories about people who, hadn't necessarily come from traditional publishing or anything, but had just published their own work and were starting to make a success of it, then it started to seem real to me and something that was worth trying for myself. But the people at this other more traditionally published focused forum, they were still quite skeptical, and I started getting into kind of arguments with them about whether self-publishing was viable or whether you could be taken seriously publishing your own work, because writing was still kind of having those arguments at the time. So I said, okay, look, I'm a no-name author. I have I have nothing. Like I barely have a finished book. I don't have any connections. I don't have any audience. I didn't have a blog at the time. I didn't have a Twitter account, and I said I'll happily be a human guinea pig here, and we'll see who's right about this, whether a no-name author can make it. And I decided that I was going to blog every step of the way. And I think I blogged every day for like a year or two or something. Now it's more like once a month. But I blogged every step of the way, because at the time there wasn't a lot of resources out there for someone who wanted to self-publish. There was only a couple of blogs. There was a lot going on in the romance world, but I wasn't plugged into that at all. But outside of that, there was very little. There was only Joe Conrath who was blogging about his journey, but that was a very different. He was coming at it from a different perspective as a traditionally published author who had some success and then was self-publishing. I was coming at it totally cold with nothing at all. So, things like how to find a designer, how to find an editor, how to actually technically put together the ebook so that it renders properly on all the different devices, and then how to find readers. At the time, nobody really had a clue what kind of marketing worked for ebooks. So it was like this grand laboratory experiment with thousands of people just sharing results. And self-publishing is still a little bit like that, although it's kind of gone a little bit more kind of corporate or whatever. But at the time, I was just blogging about every step. This is how I found an editor, and lots of people were doing the same thing at the same time in the comments. And that's why the blog kind of took off, because I accidentally kind of built a community. And so we were all looking for editors. We were all swapping tips. We were all trying different things at marketing and sharing our approaches in the comments as we all went through it. And then when I was finished the kind of 10 steps to self-publishing, one of my readers asked me to put it all together in a PDF. So he could download it and print it out, and then just follow the steps as he was publishing himself. So I started compiling this PDF, and I realized, well, if I'm making a book, I should do a better job of it. I should write some proper chapters. This needs a bit more information. This is a bit light, and all that kind of thing. So I pulled together all these blog posts, and then I think about half the book then was brand new content as well, just to round out a few topic areas. And then I published it. And the funny thing at the time, because this was a guide on how to self-publish, it was called Let's Get Digital. And at the time, I think I had sold maybe 150 books in total. I hadn't published a novel yet. I'd only published 2 short stories, one of which that I'd written like the week before I self-published it.
Was it just to squeeze it in there before you got the book out? So
yeah, totally, yeah. So it was completely ridiculous that I ever thought of doing this. But I didn't really think about what I was doing. At the start it was just a courtesy to a blog reader, and then it just morphed into this thing. And because there were so few, I don't know if there might have been 1 or 2 other self-publishing guides out there at the time. There certainly wasn't any written by a beginner for a beginner, if you know what I mean. The way sometimes they say that the best teachers are only 1 step ahead of the class. Well, I was definitely only 1 step ahead of the class. So I had that part nailed down. But I was just in the right place at the right time. I was lucky enough to get a few blurb quotes from bigger authors at the time. I got a few of the reader sites kind of featured my book, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So I'd never actually intended to go into nonfiction, to have that as such a big part of my life or my career. But I enjoyed it. Like when I wrote Let's Get Digital, I thought that was it, one and done. I won't write another book for writers, and here I am now. I think I've written 7 books for writers now, and now I'm swearing, no, there's going to be no more. But I'm already thinking of 2 more that I could write. So
it never ends. It never ends.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
But that's the thing; it's constantly changing, isn't it? Even from when we started this podcast, the landscape has changed dramatically. It's and you're right, attitudes are changing. I think you see publishers like Hachette snapping up people like Bookouture, who have that indie author mentality, that digital first mentality, that great attitude to data and to marketing their books. That they are finally kind of twigging that there is a new way to sell books, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the case of Bookouture is fascinating to me, because they essentially took, like, I found it really interesting that there was all these articles in places like The Bookseller that mightn't necessarily give a lot of credence to what self-publishers do or think. But Bookouture essentially took self-publishers' best practices and then just executed them at scale, executed them very, very well, but they executed them at scale. Like, none of the stuff they were doing really was kind of stuff they were inventing. Their innovation was not looking down at self-publishers and actually seeing that we were doing some pretty cool things with marketing, and then applying, a corporate-sized budget and scale and some, very knowledgeable staff and some great authors that they picked up too, and treating the authors very well, which was another innovation in the publishing industry that seems to have worked out well for them.
Yeah, well, again, we had Angela Marston's on the show. The show goes out on Monday at the time of recording, but it's the episode before this. Is that confusing? But she was rejected by every major UK publisher, mainly because her crime thrillers were set in the Black Country, in the Midlands, in the UK. And a lot of the UK publishers saying, we can't really sell that to the Americans, that kind of thing. But Bookouture knew through their data that, frankly, a lot of the readers didn't really care where it was set. They just wanted a good page-turning thriller. And she sold 3 million copies now. She said on our show, she said, I'll never leave them. They've been so loyal to me, and I'll be loyal to them, that she's with them for life. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. Like, Bookouture, they had data and they looked at it and they understood like how then to apply those lessons across their list. Whereas if you look at what publishers often do, like, for example, I was talking to a traditionally published friend, and I was saying to her that, like, the end matter of your book is really, really important. Like, when someone finishes your book, as long as you haven't messed up the story, if you've done a good job as an author, as a storyteller, their opinion of you is going to be very, very positive at that time. So it's the perfect time to ask them for something, whether that's a sign up to your list or to buy the second book in the series, for example. And publishers don't really do this. They might throw in a website for the imprint. They certainly won't have a sign up for the author mailing list. And they might mention there's a book 2, but they won't actually link to it. So, like, I told her, like, because they actually came to her and said, do you have any ideas about how to, increase sales? And I said, well, stick a bloody link to book 2 in there. Like, book 1 is doing well. Book 2, the sell-through doesn't seem to be happening, despite the fact that you've got really good reviews. So a link would surely help. So she went to her publisher, and the response was something like, we can't do that because if we did it for you, we'd have to do it for everybody. And I was like, you should be doing it for everybody. Why don't you want to sell more books? So, like,
That's funny. So, David, you've written 7 books, and there's always going to be that one thing that keeps coming back that people will no doubt come back to you and say, oh, when I read that just changed my life or changed my world. Can you give us an example of some of those things that you get feedback from writers about, the best tips that you've put out there?
Well, it's quite funny. Like, I've done a few conferences in the UK and a couple in Ireland. But when I go over to America, because most of my readers are in America, most of my sales have been in America. It's the market that I always have focused on. But when I go over to a conference in America and I bump into some, like, writers in the foyer or whatever, and someone comes up to you and they just say, I started reading your books a couple of years ago and now I'm making 6 figures a year. Like, it's such a wonderful thing to hear. Like, I get such a buzz out of that. I don't know if there's one particular easily digestible tip that you could pull out that people always focus on. But I think a book of mine from a couple of years ago, I think I published it in 2013. It's actually unpublished now because it's no longer relevant. It was called Let's Get Visible. But that book probably had the most people coming up to me and saying that it for the first time, they understood how Amazon worked, and that they were able to apply it to their own marketing campaigns and see a massive difference straight away. Because it was a book that kind of broke down how the Kindle Store works, how all the different algorithms that go into sales rank and all that kind of thing, and kind of crucially, how you should change your marketing approach. Like, just to give you one very simple example, just to make it a bit more practical. Before I wrote Let's Get Visible, I think the general approach that a lot of people would have had to launching a book would have been to hit everything as hard as possible on launch day. So they would have hit their whole mailing list. If they were launching on a Tuesday, for example, they would have hit up their whole mailing list. They would have announced on Facebook on the same day. They would have posted to Twitter, any kind of push. And I think traditional publishers often kind of still approach it this way. Any kind of push, they would get it together as much as possible. And in fact, there was people that figured out pretty early on that Amazon sales rank was calculated very differently to the other stores, and it very much valued recency. So what people used to do was something called a book bomb, where they would get all of their friends or colleagues or whatever, like 100 people together, to all buy the book at 11 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and the book would jump. I remember these. Yeah, I think it was back in 2010 or 2011. It was like one of the first ways that people used to kind of gain the Amazon charts, and it worked. Like, people would jump into top 100, and some of them might even hang around a little bit. But Amazon obviously didn't want their charts to be that easily gained. So the algorithms now will recognize, the system will recognize if a book is rising up in a one-off spike like that, and there's nothing organic coming behind it, then the book will fall just as quickly. So if you've ever had something like a BookBub featured deal where you've had the pleasure of selling 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 books in a day, and you didn't have anything, it's kind of hard to have anything that size coming along the following day, and you'll notice that your book falls almost as quickly as it rose. So what I learned when I was researching Let's Get Visible, and there was a group of us that were kind of looking at the data and sharing data and trying to figure out how it worked. What we used to do was called spreading the love, So we would take whatever juice that we had, whatever platform we had. Let's say we had 2,000 people on our mailing list. Instead of hitting that all on the Tuesday, we might hit 500 on the first day, 500 on the next day, and spread it out like that, and just try and get more or less even level of juice going for like 4 or 5 days. And then often that was enough to get Amazon to take over and start selling the book for you, at least at some level, maybe not at 500 copies a day or whatever, but you would bed in at a certain rank. And it was kind of a hard theory to explain to people that were used to just hitting everything hard, because your book actually wouldn't go as high in the charts using this method that I was writing about. So you mightn't hit the top 100, you mightn't get that hit to your ego, and you might only hit 500 in the charts or something, but you might hang there for a couple of months. And that's when you make the real money. Not when you do these one-day incursions into the charts. It's when you hang around at a nice rank for several weeks is when you make the real money.
That's really interesting, actually, because obviously when we started this podcast, the whole premise was about how to get a bestseller. But what you're actually saying is, if you want to make money, if you want to actually get consistency. And actually, this is kind of interesting that you say this, David, because this is kind of what we've experienced, Mark, isn't it? We had a massive, with our book Back to Reality, a huge launch day, and did exactly what, it was almost like you said, this idea of a book bomb. We had loads of people buy the book on that day, and it ran for a good kind of couple of weeks, a month. And then we've kind of been stuck in the doldrums for a bit. And it seems like there wasn't that organic backing up that you talked about, because the Amazon thing hasn't kicked in for us yet, really, has it?
No, and I think it's the really interesting bit I think David mentioned there is talking about people gaming the system on Amazon. Amazon is constantly changing. I looked after Amazon as account manager at Orion for over 10 years, and you would constantly hear things like, oh, you have to have 25 reviews, you have to have 50 reviews, you have to have this, you need to do this for pre-orders. And Amazon were very, very aware of that, and they were constantly battling off people who'd figured out a way to game the system to beat the house, and then they would change it back. And I've always said the big key to understanding Amazon is they do everything for their customers. They're very customer centric. They want to provide the best service for their customers, and they don't want people cheating and barging to the front with something that perhaps isn't very good, or has used some illicit method to make itself more visible. So they're constantly batting away which is why you need someone like David coming along who's constantly watching this kind of stuff and seeing how it's changing, and helping us figure out how it all works.
Yeah, it's taken us as the crash test authors on this journey, David. What would you recommend we do? I mean, we've had this situation where we've seen spikes in sales, but the general kind of sales day to day and the visibility on Amazon is very, very poor.
Well, Queeve, I was talking to Queeve about this. He used a slightly depressing phrase, but it rings really, really true, which is also bought purgatory, which is, if you look at our also boughts, because most of the listeners to the podcast are writers, they're not buying other novels necessarily, they're buying books about writing. So we got this novel being bought by people who are also buying Stephen King's on writing and Joanna Penn's books on writing, and it doesn't really know what to do with us. And it'd be interesting to know how we dig our way out of that.
Do you have any tips, David?
Yeah, well, this is like when you get lost at night down in like the West Country or somewhere, and like you see some old farmer coming down the road, and you ask him, you tell him where you're looking for, and he goes, "Oh, I wouldn't start from here." So what I would say is, I wouldn't say you're totally bunched, but the best way to protect against also bought pollution is not to let it happen in the first place. Now, it's too late for you guys, but we'll talk about how to fix that in a moment. But just to explain to anyone listening, also boughts, I'm sure everyone knows what they are. The customers who bought, I actually can't remember the exact phrase because we always just call it also boughts, but it's that little strip of books, not the ads, the ones that appear there more or less organically. And it says customers who bought this also bought, and then it has a list of books, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. Now, if you see that there's kind of a jumble of books there that aren't the same genre as your book, that's an indication that you might have an issue. If they're all in the same niche as you, then that's good. That's a good sign that Amazon has a good read on what kind of book it is and who to recommend it to. We're only kind of learning more about also boughts in the last few years. I'll give you an example of like a bigger mistake I made than you guys. When I was launching my second historical novel, because I write historical novels and science fiction as well as nonfiction. And my historical audience has always grown slower than my author audience, because my author audience just took off like a rocket before I even published my first novel. But when I was launching my second historical novel, it was a more commercial book. It had an American protagonist. Part of the action took place in New Orleans, and I figured it had a chance of selling a little better than my first. So I decided, at the time, I also wanted to experiment with doing a 99-cent book launch because a couple of friends had done it at the time and had some success out of it. So I thought this was a good opportunity to say to my audience of writers, hey, if any of you guys are interested in historical fiction, I also do this, and I'm launching a new book this week and it's only 99 cents. And that part went pretty well. Lots of people bought it for, I think I sold 500 copies or something in the first 4 or 5 days. So it was an okay launch. But then as soon as the also boughts appeared, they were all writer books. It was like, books from Joanna Penn, and I think there was Write, Publish, Repeat, and there was all these like books for self-publishers and authors. And then I knew immediately I was in trouble, because now when Amazon takes over and starts recommending my book to people, it's going to recommend it to people who like how-to books. It's not going to recommend it to people who like historical novels. So I think even though the launch went reasonably well, where I was selling 100, 150 copies a day for 4 or 5 days, and that should have been enough to get Amazon to start recommending it to readers and start promoting it at some level, it didn't. It just had a dead cat bounce. I think I was selling like a copy every couple of weeks or something for, 5 or 6 months, until I was able to put together a big enough promotion to kind of flush out those bad also boughts and attach the correct ones to the book. And then Amazon had a better idea of what kind of book it was. But like the danger of also bought pollution is so great that now that I'm moving into science fiction, I'm going to be writing under a pen name.
I'm not even going to ask. Yeah, because I was going to say pen name seems to be the obvious thing right now. Obviously, if you're going to be writing 2 different genres, it sounds like it's almost essential you have to split pen names.
Yeah, like if I could change one thing, if I was starting again, if I could go back and change one thing, it would be to release the historical novels under a slightly tweaked version of my name. Like even just put an initial in the middle, like Ian M. Banks did.
Right.
That's enough to be a distinct author. In the eyes of the algorithms, you'll have a separate author central page. You claim the right books for each name, and it just helps create a bit of a wall. In fact, like I'm kind of obsessed with this topic a little bit. I will be relaunching my historical novels under a slightly tweaked name later in the year. I'm now currently just started writing a science fiction trilogy, which will be under a totally secret pen name. I'll probably reveal it, further down the line once it's found its feet and it has the right also boughts, and Amazon has a clear idea of who the audience is. Then if some of my writer audience comes in and buys a few copies, it won't matter so much because it's not in that kind of early formative stage, like the first 50 sales especially, are when Amazon gets the first read on what kind of book that is. So like this has all sorts of kind of there's all sorts of reasons why we need to pay attention to this, because like especially with our first book, our inclination is to go around telling everyone to buy it. People in work and they want to, like your mother or whatever, they want to support you, So, but it's actually the worst thing that you can do. So, like when you release a book, the best thing to do is not to tell anyone, like not to tell anyone in the real world. None of those meat bags, they can't have it.
Good point,
right?
That's a good point.
You just don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. If they know about it, tell them not to buy your book. Like I actually wrote a blog post called "Please Don't Buy My Book" a while ago, which was the first time digging into this topic really. And yeah, because like that friendly person that works in HR that wants to be nice and buy your book. If she normally reads romances and you're selling a thriller, that's just going to confuse the algorithms about what kind of book
everything up, isn't it? Yeah, I can imagine.
So what you essentially want to do is only market your book, to exclusively market your book to the right readers, those who are true fans, core fans of the niche. And if you haven't done that, or if like, and sometimes like, your also bots will get messed up for good reasons. Like you might be a free book featured on BookBub, and sometimes, that can scramble your also bots. So I wouldn't necessarily panic if your also bots are messed up, but the best thing to do is to try and avoid it just by exclusively marketing to your target audience. Like, because as artists, we're always looking to kind of break out of our little niche, but we really shouldn't. Not until you've established a good sales history with that book. Then you can seek to break out of your category if you wish, but try and dominate your category first.
So I just need to check something, David. So we just need to roll back here. So for the last 2.5 years, Mr. Stay, whilst we've been flogging this book to death on the podcast, we shouldn't have even mentioned that we were writing one. The whole premise of the podcast is flawed.
Hindsight.
Hindsight's a wonderful bloody thing, isn't it? It's just like,
well, now
and here we have David on the show now, who's got 7 self-help books on writing that's just going to mess up the algorithm. So don't buy David's. No, if you bought back to I can't even work out what to say anymore. No, it's brilliant, but it's so important.
What's interesting?
So important.
What's interesting though, since Queeve put us on his newsletter the other day, I have seen a change in the also boards because Queeve in the States, his books are crime thrillers, which is different to ours, but we're also in that British humor chart.
Right.
Okay, and that's a specific Amazon.com humor chart. So that's been really helpful because the people who are buying on there, their books are they're fiction for a start. They're a lot more like the kind of stuff that we've written. So already I'm seeing a change. There's a comment here from Liam in the green room here on the webinar saying that's the best reason he's ever heard for a pen name as well. And I've always been very dubious about pen names, but that actually makes complete sense. I know we had Susan K. Quinn on the show as well, and she did that as well. She would write different genres under different pen names.
I was going to ask David, because the thing about pen names though, the challenge, and I know you love this topic, but one thing I've been thinking, because I changed my name to Mark Oliver for the book because I am writing non-fiction as Mark DeVoe, and I wanted to keep those separate. And I wasn't even thinking about Amazon, but it's obviously makes sense now. But I was also thinking about how every time you change your name for a different genre or a different set of books, you're also not being able to use that momentum that you've built up under that existing author name. And is that potentially a catch-22 for a lot of authors who are trying to earn a living at this, is that if they change genre too much, they're never going to get enough steam behind one particular name to really get that flywheel effect kick in?
Yeah, well, it depends. If I was James Patterson and I decided to release a space opera, I'd probably keep my name, Yeah. But for somebody starting out, I wouldn't worry about it that much. Like I know so many authors, like one of the most successful authors I know, she started off writing mysteries and now she writes contemporary romance, erotic romance, and she's amazingly successful. And that was her 5th or 6th book, and she had tried a few different genres until she found her niche. So like I wouldn't worry so much about switching around. And you can use your initials. You can put an initial in the middle. You can take it out, and you can always, you're always free to come out as that pen name later on. Like I know, like sure, one of the biggest romance authors in the world, Bella Andre. I think for a while she had a pen name of Lucy Kevin, where she'd write sweeter romances under that name, and now she has on her covers Bella Andre writing as Lucy Kevin. So you can bring the audiences back together later on if that suits you. So don't think that it's all set in stone. Like I know people that have relaunched books under, they've changed their name, relaunched the book purely just to clean up the also boughts or just for branding purposes, like in the eyes of the readers, like especially something like romance where readers might be very strict about, the level of steamy content they might like in a book. So like there can be all sorts of valid reasons for using a pen name. I think like the only real concern, I think that is a genuinely good point, is with regard to just the admin side of it. Like you might need a separate Facebook page, you might need a separate mailing list, and all that stuff will take work. But if it's a failure, you can just torch all that stuff and walk away. Is the other side too,
The other thing I was going to ask David is, I guess if the problem is also boughts, if you haven't actually sold that many books, then in theory, it's not going to take too much to shift it. I guess the problem is that when you've sold a larger number of books, then you've got to kind of almost do the equal and opposite effect to purge out the things that you want to most or least be associated with.
Yeah, and it's not quite like mercury in the body. There is a kind of a recency effect in it as well. Okay. So like the Also Bots will update twice a week, usually on a Thursday and Sunday evening. Usually it takes 50 sales in Amazon US anyway, 50 sales for the Also Bots to first appear. And I think before they appear is when you have the Also Vieweds instead. So yeah, like if you haven't sold anything yet at all, like it doesn't matter that much. Or if you've only sold a couple of 100 books or whatever, and you have the wrong Also Bots, I really wouldn't worry about it at all. All you need to do is put together a promotion and shift a few 100 copies, and that should clean it up. And if you're really desperate and you can't do that, or that doesn't work, you can always put your book free for a few days. Just make sure that you're booking ads on sites with which are split up by genre, because some of them will push the freebie out to a very general audience, and then that will scramble your Also Bots a little bit. But some of the sites are more like I think eReader News Today and Robin Reads and BookBub, they're split up by genre. So when readers sign up, they say they only want thrillers, they only want sci-fi, and they'll have a less chance of scrambling your Also Bots.
I also think Mark and I have been talking about how we're going to now market our book in terms of reaching that very specific audience that we're going for in women's contemporary fiction. I wonder whether one big thing, because Mark and I have talked about, is it all about the organic, build, or if we got one big thing happen. So, for example, an article in a women's magazine where there was a large readership and a lot of people came, and we're really nailing that audience, that would also surely just flush out all of that and really get some kind of flywheel effect going, do you think? Have you seen that happen?
Okay, how do I explain this? So, yeah, anything bigger than what put those Also Bots there in the first place is certainly going to shift it. And I think the more time that passes since those Also Bots attach themselves, I think the easier they will be to shift. And I think anyone does a free run and gets their Also Bots scrambled, that's kind of inevitable with a free run. Shouldn't worry too much, because the ones you get when your book is free seem to be less sticky for some reason. Okay, so but the best way, I think, to overwrite or flush out bad Also Bots is with targeted advertising, because if you do something like a feature in a woman's magazine with a high circulation, you're going to get a kind of a broad audience there. Even if it's all people that generally do kind of like that book, it won't be as drilled down as, for example, if you did an Amazon ad targeting like Nick Hornby or something, and spent a lot of money targeting his readers. There's a good chance that his book will appear in your Also Bots, because you've drilled right down to the book level. You're cutting out that subset of the audience that is very interested in that.
That's a really good tip.
That's
kind of what you've been
that's
doing,
what
Mark,
I've been. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. It is changing. It's a slow process, but it is changing. Guys, we've got a ton of listener questions for David here, so I wondered if we could go through those. We put the call out to our BXP group and our patrons for questions on the topic of how Amazon works. So, David, if we run through some of these, first one is from Lizzie Mays. She says, "Hi, my publisher is about to put my trilogy into Kindle Unlimited. Is there a way to have Amazon ads target KU? The trilogy has been out for a long time, so I see no need to advertise it to the wider store. Thanks."
Okay, so this is the question that everybody asks with ads. Is there a way to target Kindle Unlimited subscribers in particular? And there's not. There's not. If there was, everyone would be jumping all over it. That's information. Amazon is the only one who knows who is a Kindle Unlimited subscriber and who isn't. There's no way to filter the audience on Facebook or even with Amazon ads, or not with BookBub ads either. So the only way that you can increase your page reads, and I've put together giant marketing campaigns for authors that have generated millions and millions of page reads in a month. So it is possible, but the way to do it is basically to sell a lot of books, which sounds like a cheat of an answer, but you got to do it in a very particular way. Running like a campaign that will generate like millions and millions of page reads requires putting the pieces together in a slightly different way than if you're just trying to generate sales or maximize income. Because when Kindle Unlimited, success with Kindle Unlimited is all about visibility on Amazon. It is what has made visibility so sought after. And the reason why people are bidding such crazy amounts for clicks on Amazon ads is because that visibility is worth so much money. So, for example, if you're running a marketing campaign where you're optimizing for reach or audience instead of profit, you might cut your prices a little bit more. You might make one of the books in the series free. You might organize it a little differently than if you're just trying to make as much money as possible. If you're making as much money as possible, you mightn't cut the prices so much, or you might just cut them for a short window. You might have your price down for 3, 4, 5 days. Whereas with Kindle Unlimited, I find that being really, really aggressive with price, leaving the prices down for as long as possible, even like launching at a lower price and really leaving money on the table with your core audience can often be a smart move with Kindle Unlimited. Like there was one author I was working with where he had a long book series. And so anyone that's on book 8 or 9 or 10 of a series is going to pay $4.99 without blinking. They'll probably pay double that if you actually try to charge it. They would certainly pay $4.99 without blinking. But I was telling him, I was advising that he launch at $2.99, and this is a regular discussion we would have about. And he had a very good point. Like am I not leaving $2 on the table at thousands and thousands of sales to his existing audience, to his mailing list? And he's right. He does have a point, and this is why a killer Kindle Unlimited strategy is a little bit risky, because you are leaving money on the table. What you're doing is you're trading income today for visibility, and that visibility is going to turn into more income tomorrow. And generally, the mechanism, if you want to get really into the nitty gritty of this, the mechanism that powers all this is something called the popularity list on Amazon, which is a little bit like the bestseller list, but it's kind of different. And that's really what powers most recommendations to Kindle Unlimited subscribers. So when I'm designing a campaign that is really aiming for page reads, I will be aiming to maximize my visibility on the popularity list. So I'm aiming to jump up high on the popularity list and stay there for as long as possible. And that's what will trigger a huge swathe of recommendations to Kindle Unlimited subscribers. So it might mean designing something that looks like you're leaving money on the table, being really aggressive with price, keeping those prices down for longer, and just being patient, because one of the weird quirks of the popularity list is that it's on a 4-day delay. It's not near instant like the bestseller list. So you might run a promotion and then you'd be like, where's my page reads? And you might notice this, if anyone who's listening who's in Kindle Unlimited, they might notice where they run a promotion and then the page reads come a week later. And that's the popularity list kicking in. So you've got to take a bit more of a longer view. It's not so much about did I make a profit or how much profit did I make this week with the promotion. It's more like zooming back to the monthly level when you're really going for the big page reads.
Cool. Very good. What's interesting is we've not been on KU since Christmas. And just this week, we got something like 300 page reads. So I think someone's had it on their device and just thought, oh, I'll read that now.
Yeah, it shows you how much people
There's always a delay.
Hoard a book when it's free. Like I haven't had anything in Kindle Unlimited myself under this name for I think 18 months, and I got a bunch of reads the other day. So that's 18 months it's been sitting on someone's Kindle. It's mad.
Yeah. Okay. Next question from Pernilla Hughes. My question: when on my Amazon Author Central pages, I get all excited when I see peaks in the graph, and I believe that these were sales. I've since been told that's not the case. It can just be people looking. Is that true?
No, it's not true, actually. And this is the danger of listening to Amazon when they talk about their system, because it's been funny. I was actually looking at the help pages earlier on today for KDP sales rank, and the information is less useful today than it was in 2011. I think they're generally trying to obscure it more and more and more. Basically, and there's a lot of myths surrounding sales rank, because I think Amazon don't actually know how their own system works. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like I used to work for Google and 15 years ago, and the system there was so complex. There wasn't a single person at the company who understood how the whole ad system worked. There was different people who understood different bits of it, but when something broke and it cut across several departments, they'd all have to get in a conference call, and it was like the blind people feeling a camel, and
that's brilliant.
Everyone trying to work out what it is,
because we think everyone's got it completely sussed, but in reality, it's not the case, is it?
No, not at all. And I can only imagine that Amazon's system is several levels of more complex now, especially now 15 years later. So I don't think they necessarily, especially if you're talking about a frontline customer service person for KDP, I doubt they have a really good grasp of what really goes into sales rank. So they're just reading the talking points that they're given. And the talking points that they're given don't want to tell you exactly how it works, because they don't want, especially scammers and the like, gaming the system. But I can tell you how it works. So it's very, very simple. There's a lot of myths about it. People think that, looking at your book affects it. And it does indirectly. We'll get to that in a moment. People think reviews affect it, and it does indirectly, but we'll get to that in a moment. But the only thing that actually affects sales rank is sales. That's it, just sales. And borrows, so like a borrow in Kindle Unlimited, one borrow equals one sale. It's very, very simple. And recent sales are worth more than historical sales, because Amazon wants a lot of churn in its store. Again, going back to being like totally focused on what the reader wants. Amazon knew early on, like if you look at the Sunday Times bestseller list, that takes a week to change, right? So how useful is it as a discovery tool? It might be useful as a discovery tool for 10 minutes on Sunday afternoon, and then it's no longer useful. Whereas Amazon want people coming back and looking at the charts and staying on the site and spending more time on it and getting their recommendations from Amazon and not the Sunday Times. So they update their charts every hour, because Amazon, and there's all sorts of things baked into the algorithms, and including with sales rank, that will increase that churn. And you'll notice if you hit the charts on Barnes & Noble or somewhere outside of Amazon, that you might rise as quickly as Amazon, but you don't fall as quickly as you do on Amazon. Amazon made a very deliberate decision, and there's lots of changes they've made to the algorithms over the years to increase that churn, because they know that someone living in the Midwest who's retired, who reads 5 or 6 books a week, they will go into the top 100 on contemporary romance maybe several times a week, looking for a new book to read. And so they want to see new books, So Amazon wants that churn. But that's actually, it's a double-edged sword. It means it's hard to stay in the charts, but it's easier to get in there. But also, like, once you know how all this stuff works, you can kind of take advantage of it and tweak your marketing accordingly. But yeah, sales rank is just sales. A sale today is probably worth half as much tomorrow and half as much again the following day, and after 3 or 4 days it's worth very little, and certainly in a week or two it's worth virtually nothing. But that's the basics of sales rank. It's very, very simple.
I've often devaluing currency. Then it's just a thing that
or some radioactive half-life thing. I was dozing away in physics class when we did that, so I won't try and finish that sentence.
Interesting.
Well, talking of rankings takes us on to our next question, which is from Lorna Cook, who on the day of recording, her book is out today. Her book, The Forgotten Village, is out today. So congratulations on that, Lorna.
Fantastic.
And Lorna is coming on the show in a few weeks, and it's an absolutely brilliant episode. And she's been refreshing the Kindle charts constantly all day because it's day one. And she's asking, what rankings mean for paperbacks and ebooks in terms of volumes sold, if such a thing can be worked out? And I can tell you that having worked for a publisher, they are obsessed with, if we sell another 100, will that get us this many points up the chart? What does that mean? So is there some way of working that out, David?
Yes, you buy all my books and the answer is in there. No, we every so often self-publishers get together and we just we pool. We you know, if you have a book that's relatively stable, whether it's selling 5, 10, 50, whatever a day, and we just share the information on the sales to rank, and we put together a little chart and just reckon where it is. So just to tell you roughly, so if you're to hit the top 100,000 on Amazon, right, that only takes a sale or two a day. If a book is ranked below that, it's probably selling less than two, certainly less than one a day. And then to hit the very top can take anything from 2, 3, 4, 5,000 to 10,000 or 20,000, depending on what's going on that day. I know an author who I think he sold almost 100,000 books in a weekend, and he didn't hit number one on Amazon because it was the same weekend that Hunger Games was released in the cinema.
No.
So he never got that. He never got that bestseller, ribbon or whatever. But
I bet he was gutted.
He did
counting all his money, was he?
Yeah, pretty
crying
good.
Over all
drying his
bills.
eyes with dollar bills. Yeah, but
couldn't count it properly anymore because he was crying so much.
Yeah, but oh yeah.
What was that book out of interest? 100,000 copies in a weekend. How does someone do that?
Well, seeing as I've revealed his sales figures in confidence, I probably have to keep quiet about the title.
It's great to know that happens, though. It's great to know that happens, and that was it was actually an Amazon published book, but it was an indie author who just signed over those books to Amazon, and then they turned on the rockets as they can do now and then. Yeah. But yeah, so to hit the top 100, which might be a touch more realistic than hitting number one, you have to sell about 1,000 copies in a day, sometimes a little bit more. Like I think not too long ago, I was doing some promotion. I had 1,000 copies and I only got to 120 or something. So from a cold start, like if your book isn't selling very well at the time, and then you put together a Facebook campaign or whatever, you might need maybe 1,300, maybe even 1,500 some days, like especially around Christmas. When you need more sales to hit the charts. To hit the top 500 might take 300 sales or so. To hit the top 1,000, maybe 150, 200. And hit the top 5,000 might take 30, 40, 50 sales in a day. Now, this is Amazon US. This is ebooks. This is the Kindle Store. I would only be guessing if we're talking about print or the UK.
Well, prints, and I can tell you, certainly from the UK point of view, if you were to sell 5,000 or 6,000 copies in print, you would get in the top 10 on the Kindle print chart. But then again, that would also get you in the Sunday Times charts as well. So there is a kind of a correlation there. But again, there's a big drop off. Unless that's a constant, steady rate of sale, then it starts to drop off again.
Is the idea of selling a paperback the same weight as an ebook, David, or are these completely different things? Are they two different charts?
Now, it's an open question about whether the algorithms are slightly different for paperbacks. I've just been having a discussion with Amazon customer service about this, in fact, where I had a book. It was the book I mentioned earlier, Let's Get Visible. I actually took it off sale in January 2018. But it kept having those spikes that one of your listeners was asking about. And for the first 10 or 15 times that happened, I presumed it was just because it's print on demand. Amazon would have 10 or 15 or 20 copies perhaps of stock that they would sell off. And then I contacted them about it in March 2018. They said they'd finished selling whatever stock they had left. And because I was more concerned that someone would spend $15 on a book that was out of date, especially when I had a book, Strangers to Superfans, which had come out and actually superseded it. And I would rather they bought the up-to-date one instead of spending that amount of money on a 5-year-old book. So they took it off sale and they said they'd sold all the stock. But I saw another 30 over the last year or so. I was just looking at it the other day, another 30 or so spikes, which seemed to be indicative of a sale. It wasn't just the minor up and down that you might get because sales rank is a relative measure. This is where the book was going from 1 million in the store right the way up to 100,000, which is clearly indicative of a sale. And they, after claiming otherwise in the first instance, they then said that used book sales will count towards that sales rank, which is something that I didn't know, because I don't pay that much attention to print. So that's one indication that the print ones are a little bit different.
The third-party marketplace thing used to drive us up the wall when I was at Orion, because even if you'd have infringing US editions which weren't supposed to be for sale in the UK, but there's always some warehouse somewhere that's selling them, and they would be on the same detail page, and it used to really throw a spanner in the works. And this is part of Amazon's ethos, that whole A to Z. That smile on Amazon goes from the A to Z. Their idea is they want everything available all the time, which is why they're so keen on print on demand. They're trying to get major publishers to get on board with print on demand, because again, it's this customer service thing. If you want that old edition of a book, you should be able to get it. Yes, they can put a thing in that says there is a newer edition of this book and direct you towards it, but they still want to be able to offer. The only time they ever completely remove a book from sale is if there's a legal issue.
Yeah. And even then, they'll be slow enough depending on who's asking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. We haven't got much time left, but we've got a couple more questions and some questions from some of the people on the live show here as well. Ian Sainsbury, he says, Amazon ads, Facebook and BookBub ads are the three main marketing channels these days. And he says he has read your new book on the last of those. There's a new book on BookBub. If an author was time poor, incredibly shit at marketing, or both, which one of those would it be best to concentrate on?
Okay, well, I'm always interested in systems that can kind of act passively in the background, that don't require a lot of hands-on management, and so that would count Facebook out straight away, I think, because Facebook is the most complicated platform. It's the most expensive to learn. It's the most time-consuming. Even when you know your stuff and you've mastered it, it's still most time-consuming in terms of setting up your campaigns and monitoring them. I'd say Amazon ads is probably the easiest platform to get a small amount of sales going. But if you're looking for more than a handful a day, you're going to run into a wall of knowledge with Amazon ads, where it gets very frustrating and very difficult to scale. And it's probably the easiest platform to learn and the hardest to master, I would suggest, in terms of, not just because it's not that complex, it's just it's very frustrating. It's not very replicable. You can do the same thing 100 times and get 200 different results. So it's very hard. It's very hard to get better at it. Like I've been running Amazon ads for, I don't know, 3 years now or something. I'm not entirely sure I've improved at all over that entire time. And this is something I used to do for a living. And like Amazon ads is probably the one that's closest to Google AdWords, which used to be my job. And I was doing campaigns for these people spending millions of dollars. And I still can't figure out Amazon ads. It drives me crazy. Oh my gosh. But I can get a small amount of baseline of sales going. I think anybody can do that with a little bit of practice. So if you don't have much time or money, or you don't want to spend your life learning ads or monitoring them, Amazon ads is probably the way to go. After that, I think BookBub ads is very easy to pick up. There is a difficulty curve with BookBub ads, but the good thing is it's right at the start. And if you get through the testing process and figure out who your comp authors are, who your author targets should be, once you have that figured out, once you've done that testing, BookBub ads gets really easy. You'll run campaigns, you'll get very similar results. It's very, very predictable, which so few things are in book marketing, and that's a good one to have. I find the conversion rate is best on BookBub ads by far than any other platform, because it's an audience of real book buyers rather than somewhere like a generalist audience like Facebook. But really, if you don't want to spend a lot of time marketing, and you don't want to spend a lot of money marketing, I think the best thing to do is download my book, Amazon Decoded. It's free. You just have to sign up to my list, and you can unsubscribe afterwards if you want. I don't really care. But just read the book. It's 50 pages. It will explain all the algorithms that go into the Kindle Store. It'll give you examples of how you need to change your marketing. And this is stuff that doesn't actually cost you any money. Things like getting smart on keywords, getting smart on categories, increasing your footprint on Amazon. Because we were talking about the top 100 there, but there's actually 10,000 bestseller lists on Amazon. There's 10,000 categories on Amazon. Each one of those has their own top 100. They are places that you can be visible on, even if you're only selling a book or two a day. When you upload your book to Amazon, you only get 2 categories, but with smart keyword choices, you can expand that up to 10 categories. So, and this is stuff that costs you no money, that you only need to do when you're publishing your book. You don't need to review it every week. I think I look at my metadata maybe once a year or something. And this will not only like make you more discoverable by readers, it'll also means that anytime you are able to generate a sales spike, or anytime you get an accidental one like you guys did the other day, you'll get more out of those sales spikes. The sales spikes will be a little bit bigger, and they'll also stretch out for a little bit longer. So it'll help with, because the tricky thing with ads is making a profit from what you're spending. But having your metadata in good shape and being in lots of categories, relevant categories. I don't recommend squatting everywhere. And having good keywords so that people searching for books your book will be more visible. Getting all that stuff right doesn't cost anything. It only costs a couple hours of your time. Like just read the book; it's free, and just get smarter with your keywords and categories.
You mentioned,
listeners, I've downloaded a number of David's books. I'd say the only problem with them is they are so chock with information. You might have to read them 3 or 4 times. Seriously, it's they are chocker, and I'm finding them very, very useful.
That's brilliant. You mentioned about extra categories there. Is that something that happens automatically, David, when you start putting in keywords, or do you actually have to kind of request them? Or
well, there's 3 different ways to get into a category. One is on upload, but that's a kind of a restricted choice. You don't get the menu that Amazon lets you pick from when you're uploading is a restricted menu. You don't get access to all the very granular subcategories that your book could be in. And this is one place where self-publishers can get a real advantage over publishers, because publishers like HarperCollins or Hachette, they don't necessarily take the time to put you in a really granular subcategory. So they might just put your book in science fiction, for example, but they won't drill down and put it into alien invasion or whatever the most appropriate subcategory might be. And this really, not only does it make it harder for readers to discover your book, but it also means that when you do get together, you are running ads or whatever, and you get a few sales a day going, you're missing out on hitting a chart that readers will look at to discover and look for books. So, like people are always looking for an edge, and like this is a really easy one that costs you nothing.
Excellent. We'll definitely have to look into that, because I think our categories are a bit all over the place, Mark, aren't they?
I did do a category refresh just a couple of weeks ago, and it has got us quite high in a couple of specific charts. You have to email them directly, and I was using a KDP Rocket to figure out what the best charts for us would be. So since then, we've kind of persistently been in the top 10 of sort of 3, 4, 5 different charts, but it's just finding that right one that might just get us motivated. But again, you can pick we were number 3 in religious inspirational fiction the other day.
Yeah.
Now I would argue it's possibly inspirational, but it's not religious.
Well, exactly. You want very specific categories, don't you? But
you don't.
I think it's the danger isn't so much misleading. I guess that's a danger too. But the danger is like you only want to be visible to people who are your actual target audience, not just So let me put it this way. Let's say a load of people who are interested in religious and inspirational books went to the charts on Amazon and they saw your book. One of 2 things is going to happen. They're either going to buy it, and then maybe it's not for them, and they might leave a bad review, or they might mess up your also boughts, or they're not going to buy it. And Amazon's going to see that, well, this book doesn't have a good conversion rate. So like there's all sorts of reasons why you only want to restrict exposure to your core audience, because Amazon looks at all sorts of things. It looks at whether someone buys your book and reads it right away and then buys 3 more of your books that evening. It looks at whether someone doesn't finish your book. It looks at whether someone has shown your book and doesn't buy it. So you want all these metrics to be good. Like you sometimes you see a book and it seems to be just glued at 200 in the rankings. And you're wondering like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like he probably has excellent metrics all the way through. Every time Amazon shows his book to a thriller reader, they buy it, and they read it that day and they buy 3 more of his books. So like there is no real. I mean to say. I was going to say there's no mystery as to why a book can stick in the charts like that, but there's always a reason. It mightn't be immediately discernible, but there's always a reason why a book sells. Like I think sometimes we think that there's like some kind of book fairy out there who will sprinkle sales dust on us. Like I think the industry actually cultivates this a little bit. Like when they talk about things like sleeper hits. Like I actually hate that term because I don't think there's any such thing. I think there's always a reason why a book starts selling and why it stops selling, even if we can't figure it out.
It's like the old adage, there's no thing as an overnight success, is there? I mean, it's the same. I guess it's the same with books online. Yeah. Excellent stuff. So, Mr. Stay, I think we've got so many questions from people. We're going to have to do a quick fire round, David, very quickly. If you've got a few.
Okay, got Neil Bain in here.
Yeah, go on, Mark.
Okay, Neil Bain says, how would you push a single short story on Amazon, if at all? You used to have Kindle singles, didn't you? Is that still a thing?
It is a thing, but you can't. It's not a category that anybody can put their books into. Amazon actually acquires books for that category. You can apply, I think, but I think it's like querying an agent. Like, you'd be lucky to get a response. I think with short stories are a tough sell outside of certain niches like erotica. They're a tough sell. So I think unless it's something long enough or that can be rewritten as a novella, which do actually sell reasonably well in a lot of genres. Short stories, I think, are better used as a reader magnet, something to dangle to get people to sign up to your list as a bonus for your existing readers, something to re-engage your mailing list, something like that. I think the first two things I publish were short stories. I love writing them, but I've stopped writing them, quite frankly, because it's not really viable.
Another thing that came up in the comments from our listeners in the studio today, Robin mentioned that there's kind of rumors floating around that also boughts are possibly vanishing. What's your take on that? Have you heard that too?
Yeah, well, Amazon's always split testing different things with our book pages. You know, they'll usually trying to shoehorn in another 100 ads somewhere. You know, but they're always they're always testing different iterations. Like, I think a while back there, I think UK readers saw the also bots disappear and another line of Amazon ads came in instead. That didn't seem to be popular with readers, and that didn't seem to stick. And they're trying something else, like new and popular, which are kind of like also bots, but just for you. And I don't think readers like that one either. Look, they're always playing with also bots because that is really valuable real estate. But the thing is, I've seen Amazon experimenting with this for 2 years, and they only ever go away temporarily. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. And here, this is actually a really important point. What's on your page is just a visual representation of what's really important. What's really important is the connections between your book, almost like neurons in the brain. Those connections are what are really valuable. So if they disappear from your page, that's just a pain in the ass for you. That's just an inconvenience. It doesn't mean Amazon's going to stop recommending your book. It doesn't mean that the recommendation engine has disappeared. All that stuff is still happening underneath the surface.
Interesting. And Craig actually makes a very viable point, which is saying, I hope they stick around, because otherwise it could be totally pay to play. And one of the things that I do see possibly happening in the future is the more that we all as authors spend money on Amazon keywords and the more money they make from advertising, the more it's going to shift to that model, because really that's, I mean, if there's money to be made, they're not a charity. They're not going to say, well, let's help these authors out. It's going to be right, who's willing to pay the most. And it could all spiral into a place where actually it becomes really hard, maybe in the same way that Facebook ads has, to actually make money selling such a low cost item as a book.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I like BookBub ads so much at the moment, because if you're talking about some of the bigger authors and books on Amazon ads at the moment, you almost need like $1 a click or more to appear like anywhere near the front. Facebook click costs are creeping up. If you're just talking about newsfeed, like I actually only advertise newsfeed because the conversion rates are just so much better that I'll happily pay 2 or 3 times as much for the click, because I know it'll convert like 20 times better than the Audience Network or something. But clicks to newsfeed, they've been going up quite a lot as well, 50, 60, 70, 80 cents. And even like video views, which were the cheap thing on Facebook for a while, they're getting expensive. But BookBub, I can still run a BookBub campaign, and I can still sometimes get like 25, 30 cent a click, which is, you can really work with that, especially if you've got a series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. I think we've got one last question from Sage. This is a tiny question. She says, there's so much that writers need to do, but it can be difficult for beginner writers who haven't gone full time yet. What's the one thing, other than writing, obviously, that a writer absolutely must be doing?
Good question. I think the hardest thing as a beginner, and I think it's still one of the hardest things, it's certainly still one of the hardest things for me. Like, I've written 10 books now, 3 novels, 7 nonfiction. I've just started my 4th novel. Knowing where you're positioning that in the market, you know, like there's so much that has to go into, so much goes into marketing that even starts before you put the first word on the page. Like what shelf in the bookshop is that book going to end up on? Like on Amazon, we can put it on several shelves at once, and that's a huge advantage, especially for people who write things which cross genres. But you have to know who your reader is. That is the most important thing. Try and figure out who your ideal reader is. Like, if you've read Stephen King's On Writing, he talks about his ideal reader all the time. And for him, it's his wife. And he always, when he's writing, he imagines his wife Tabitha, and whether she'd like that passage, whether she'd like that twist, whether she believed that relationship between those two people. And that always keeps them on the straight and narrow. And I think it's important to take that concept and kind of run with it into marketing as well. So and all the way through. For me, like writing and marketing, it's almost like a spectrum, you know, like the two things are kind of intertwined, they're symbiotic. So like your book doesn't just have to have all the tropes that a reader of that niche will expect. You've also got to package it that way, price it that way, describe it that way in the blurb, and then exclusively reach out to those people via advertising. And this is where, okay, when the book is done, you need to stop listening to your inner artist. Your inner artist will always lead you astray. Your inner artist is telling you, like, you know, get out there with a megaphone, put it on billboards, get everyone to read your book. You don't want everyone to read your book. You want fans of your genre to check your book out. Everything else can really get you into trouble in terms of bad reviews, in terms of not generating word of mouth, and in terms of Amazon's algorithms not knowing who to recommend your book to.
That's very, very wise.
Very good advice.
Yeah, in fact, the million sales will come once you've discovered that group. Ultimately, if it goes on that journey, but everyone wants to start on the million sales, which is trying to sell to everyone. It's a common mistake. Yeah. Brilliant.
David, where can people find you online?
Okay, so davidguaghran.com is my website. I should probably spell the surname GAUGHRAN.com. And that's my author website. So there's loads of information in there on every aspect of self-publishing and marketing. There's actually a blog post that I put up just the other day, and I'm so slot-like with the blog that it'll probably still be the top post by the time this goes out to the podcast listeners, called How to Sell Books in 2019. And this is a monster blog post. It's like 3,700 words long. It covers everything from mailing lists, Amazon ads, Facebook, BookBub ads, and how all those parts intertwine. It has links to all sorts of different resources, talks a little bit about the algorithms, and talks about marketing plans and how to take advantage of them, how to set up a promotion. So go through that. Like, it's loads of advice, all free. I also have a mailing list. I have a weekly marketing newsletter, which is also free, where I cover different aspects just of marketing. Don't talk about anything else except for marketing. And on that mailing list, I covered BookBub ads in a kind of 8-part series last year. I'm halfway through doing a series on Facebook ads. I'm going to start doing an Amazon ads one soon as well. And that goes out every Friday. So you can sign up at davidguaghran.com. And as a bonus for signing up, you get a free copy of that book I talked about, Amazon Decoded, which you should really check out. But if you're at an earlier stage, you still haven't figured out how to self-publish yet, I have a guide for that as well called Let's Get Digital, which is it's a really big book. It's 75,000 words or something, I think. And it covers every aspect of how to publish your book, how to find an editor. It has lots of stories from other self-publishers to give you a bit of inspiration. And it teaches you a little bit about the business as well, which I think everyone has to learn these days.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Stuff.
For our listeners, podcast listeners, we'll put links in the show notes to make that easy for you guys to find. David, that was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I think it's a testament that we've been listening more than anything else. You know, often with these live shows, there's so much interaction, but we've all just been sitting there completely enthralled. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great, David. I've got a whole page full of notes here that we're going to have to kind of chat about after the show. And thank you as well to everyone who joined us today live in the studio, to all of you, to Richard, to Sage, to Neil, to Robin, to Mark, to Liam, to Craig, and everyone else. And we just want to say thank you so much for supporting this podcast, making it possible. If you would like to pop along, we have a newsletter as well at bestsellerexperiment.com, and check out the newsletter tab. And come along, download our free book, The Vault of Gold, which we haven't talked about for a while. It's still kicking around there if you'd like to have a look at it, which is all the best advice from the very best interviews we've done over the last 2.5 years, Mark. Can you believe it? We're rapidly approaching episode 200. Absolutely crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. And please subscribe, rate and review on your podcatcher of choice. That really makes us more visible. Big thanks to Dave, our editor, and to Dave, our guest. And do come and find us online. We're Facebook Bestseller Experiment, Twitter and Instagram. We're at Bestseller XP. And if you are listening to this thinking, I want to get on the live show, I want to get all this extra deep dive episodes and stuff, remember, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. Support, and you'll find more details there.
And if you haven't messed up our also boughts already, please rush over to Amazon and buy our book Back to Reality, because we love those also boughts. Whatever you've read in the past, just come and buy the book and tell your friends if you like it. It'd be great. So thank you again, David.
No, don't buy the book. Don't buy the book. No, don't not supposed to tell anyone. Rule number 1: don't tell anyone.
Brilliant. Thanks again, David. All the best with all of your ventures in the future, and look forward to maybe having you back on the show at some point in the future. That'd be great. And
yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Brilliant stuff. All right, everyone. Well, it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Bye. Don't say that.
Sorry.
Don't say that. Oh my God.
Oh no, sorry. I just suddenly realised what you